So on behalf of our director, Clyde Chrisman, and the staff of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, I welcome you to the virtual public meeting to discuss the update to the Sky Meadows State Park Master Plan. In the past, we've held these meetings at the park, but tonight we're playing it safe and bringing the meeting to you at your home or office. We thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to assist us with our planning process. I would like to thank fellow DCR staff members at the Division of State Parks, Natural Heritage, and my fellow staffers at the Division of Planning and Recreation Resources for their help in updating this park master plan. I'd also like to thank the staff of the DCR Marketing and Public Communications Office for their assistance in promoting the event and finalizing the public presentation. Next slide, please. So tonight we have three presenters. Dr. Melissa Baker, State Parks Director, will review the history of our Virginia State Parks, as well as the programs and facilities that we offer. Next, Kevin Bowman, Park Manager at Sky Meadows State Park, will give an introduction and overview of the Sky Meadows State Park. Then I will review the master plan map and discuss the phase development plan for the park with you. The phase development plan is a list of proposed projects over the next 30 years. The map and phase development plan were sent to you in your meeting confirmation. Finally, we will be accepting public comments from you via the chat box. Public comment and questions are welcomed throughout the meeting, as well as 10 minutes after the meeting. Thanks also to Kelly McClary, Director of the Division of Planning and Recreation Resources, for monitoring the chat box this evening. All comments and questions that are accepted in the chat box will be responded to by June 20th, 2021. And this presentation will be available online following the meeting. Additional comments can be made to myself, Bill Cockle, Park Planner, at the address on the screen, or the email on the screen, or phone number. This information will be available again later on in the presentation if you're trying to write it down. You'll have a chance to see this again. Next slide, please. The purpose of the meeting is to present the park master plan and facility phasing to the public. And public input is encouraged regarding recommended park amenities. Attendees will have the opportunity to provide input with regard to priorities for facilities and outdoor recreation opportunities. Public participation is required of the master planning process. Next slide, please. I'm pleased to introduce the Director of Virginia State Parks, Dr. Melissa Baker. She is the 8th State Parks Director in our 85-year history. She has experience in state parks from Wisconsin, Montana, and most recently as the Director of North Dakota Parks and Recreation Department. She earned a master's degree in outdoor recreation management from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale and a doctorate in forestry, outdoor recreation management, and protected area planning from the University of Montana in Missoula. I present to you Dr. Melissa Baker.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you everyone who has joined us this evening. I'm going to spend a little bit of time giving you an overview of the Virginia State Park system. And after I've talked about the system, then the State Park Manager, Kevin, will come in and tell us a little more about Sky Meadows specifically. But I'd like to start by just talking about the mission of the Department of Conservation and Recreation and the mission of the State Park system. These two missions nest within each other, as this Virginia State Parks is part of the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And so both of these missions guide the work that we do. The mission of the Department of Conservation and Recreation is to conserve, protect, enhance, and advocate wise use of the Commonwealth's unique natural, historical, recreational, scenic, and cultural resources. And within that mission is the State Park mission, which is to conserve the natural, scenic, historic, and cultural resources of the Commonwealth and provide recreational and educational opportunities consistent with the good stewardship of these lands, waters, and facilities that leave them unimpaired for future generations. And Sky Meadows is a really nice example of that mission in action. Next slide, please. So when talking about the history of Virginia state parks, we generally divide this into three phases of the state park system. So Virginia State Parks was created in 1936 with the opening of state parks: First Landing, Douthit, Stanton River, Westmoreland, Ferrystone, and Hungry Mother. And these original 6 state parks were made possible as part of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. You have heard of the Work Progress Association and then also the Civilian Conservation Corps. And those were programs putting young men to work on conservation and natural resources projects across the nation. And in these first 6 parks especially, you see evidence of that work, as that is how these parks were created. Next slide, please. The second phase of the state park system is the 1940s through the 1980s, and that's as the system is growing. So during this time, we had a steady procession of new parks acquired and developed through a combination of funds, donations, federal grant money, and state capital development. So a lot of development in the parks and new parks during this second phase of the 1940s through the 1980s. Next slide, please. So the third phase of the Virginia State Park system is the phase that we are in currently, and that is the 1990s through present, where voter support led to more growth and development in the state park system, primarily through 2 major bond referendums, one in 1992 and one in 2002, which funded more than $214 million of projects. That included 5 new parks and land for 6 more, 31 natural areas, 296 building projects, including campgrounds, cabins, support facilities, and other types of projects. And we continue to acquire lands largely by donation or discounted sales. And the challenge continues to be to find development funds. Next slide, please. So today's Virginia State Park system is 40 parks strong. We just opened our 40th state park, Machicomico State Park, on April 16th of this year. We have an additional 4 parks under development. We're almost 76,000 acres, and 34 of our parks are on the historic register. We have over 600 miles of trails. 32 of our parks have overnight facilities. 11 are day use parks. And you see we have a lot of facilities in these parks, 29 visitor centers, 19 picnic shelters. We have 11 swimming pools and 4 beaches, or 11 swimming beaches and 4 pools. And then we also have restaurants and snack bars in the system. Next slide, please. And each park that you visit has a unique set of facilities, activities, and services. So we have a variety of day uses: hiking, swimming, picnicking, boating, bicycling, horse riding, canoeing, and rafting. We also have overnight facilities, cabins, and camping through many of our parks. And going back to our mission, we have a lot of educational opportunities as well. So remember that in the Virginia State Park mission, educational opportunities is part of our mission. And we do have a strong education and interpretation program. We also have conference and meeting facilities that you can use at state parks. So they're really nice places to have meetings, and we host a lot of folks through that. Next slide, please. So the relevance of the Virginia State Park system in the 21st century and beyond, perhaps we've never seen this as clearly as we've seen over the past year, but parks are important parts of the community. State parks bring economic benefit, and they also engage the local community through volunteerism and friends groups. So the state park is not just an entity to itself, it really is integrated into the community. Many of you have heard of nature deficit disorder and how people are beginning to be less connected to nature, and state parks offers opportunities for people to connect to nature, relieve the daily stresses of their life, and to have affordable outdoor recreation opportunities. And so we are critical infrastructure for connecting people to nature. And the need for parks is greater today than it's ever been. Places for people to reconnect with nature, to be with family and friends, to reestablish personal well-being. And again, as I said, this past year we saw a lot of visitation to parks. Sky Meadows certainly saw strong visitation, many new visitors, people realizing the importance of parks and public lands to their daily lives, as they needed places where they could go and have healthy recreation experiences and connect to the outdoors. Next slide, please. So to tell us more about Sky Meadows State Park specifically, I'd like to turn this over to Kevin Bowman, our park manager at Sky Meadows State Park. As a kid in South Central Pennsylvania, Kevin played with tractors and dreamed of being a farmer until his first trip to Gettysburg set him on a course of studying history and the American Civil War in college. Kevin's career in parks began in 2005 at another historic farm, the Eisenhower National Historic Site in Gettysburg, and has included time at 3 other national parks, 2 private historic sites, and now Sky Meadows State Park. Kevin began at Sky Meadows as Chief Ranger Visitor Experience in late 2014 and became park manager in April 2020. And Kevin's grateful to be able to combine his love of history and farming at this park and community. So as you can see, Kevin is a perfect fit for Sky Meadows State Park. So please help me welcome him as he tells us more about Sky Meadows.
All right, thank you very much, Melissa, and good evening, everybody. I see a lot of familiar names and a lot of familiar organizations. I know a lot of people know a little bit about our park, but for those of you who have never been here before, this will provide a little information on who we are, why we're here, and a little bit of our makeup. So as you can see, Sky Meadows, about 1,860 acres in the far northwest corner of Fauquier County with a small portion in Clark County. We opened to the public in 1983. The land was acquired through local philanthropist Paul Mellon in the late 1970s. Next slide. And really, Paul Mellon's vision was, as you can see in that last photograph, was just the unique landscape of this valley, this pastoral landscape in an agricultural setting. And he really saw a unique opportunity for people to be able to come out and recreate in that area with minimal impact to the land. And that's what we continue to do to this day. Next slide. So what guides us here at the park, everything we do from our programs, events, our resource management is based on this guiding theme. And that's that we preserve this part of the historic Crooked Run Valley. That's really important for us. Though we operate within our borders and our boundaries, we really see ourselves as part of this community of the Crooked Run Valley, and as a landscape as a whole. And that landscape created such rich natural diversity. It's got a real depth of history, and it's a perfect opportunity for people to recreate and to rejuvenate. And if you break that down into 4 main areas, that's nature, agriculture, history, and rest and rejuvenation. So next slide. So it's thanks to that open landscape, the pastoral landscape that changed, combined with waterways and woodlands, that we have this amazing natural diversity at the park. If you go to Sky Meadows Nature Guide online, you can see that wide array of native bird, insect, plant species. And so a lot of our programs, our resource management, initiatives that we do here focused on getting people exposed to that nature. Next slide. And it all comes back to farming. We want our visitors to realize once they're at Sky Meadows that they're on an active, ongoing farm that's based on the history of this Piedmont farm. So people actually have the opportunity to hike in pastures with cattle. Those cattle are managed and owned by Virginia Department of Corrections agribusiness program. Our visitors also get to see chickens that we maintain here at the park, see fields of Indian corn that are planted. We hope that people will get to see what a day-to-day life of an historic Piedmont farm was like. Next slide. And that's all rooted in our history. We want people to be able to see, hear, taste all of the experiences they would have had here from colonial era through the mid 20th century. So we have historic structures. We have a lot of program partners that provide hearth cooking demonstrations. We do tours of the historic homes, blacksmith demonstrations, a lot of activities that really immerse people into that history. Next slide. And then lastly, again, we want people to get out and we want them to rest and to rejuvenate their mind, body, and spirit. And they're able to do that through a lot of the resources that we have in the park, including our trails. So next slide. So perhaps what we're, one of the things we're most well known for are our trails. So we're considered a day use park. We don't have overnight lodging facilities. We have a campground, which I'll talk about here in a second. But a lot of folks come out for our trails. We have about 22 miles of hiking trails. We do link into the Appalachian Trail, and 10.5 miles of our hiking trails are also open for our equestrian community as well as cyclists. And then one of the recent resources that we opened, thanks to our partnership with the Shenandoah chapter of Virginia Master Naturalists, was our Sensory Explorers Trail that opened in 2019. And that trail was designed specifically to open up opportunities for greater audiences. And this one specifically was designed for those who are blind or have visual impairments. And we continue to work with the Shenandoah chapter today, again, to expand those offerings and have adaptions for those with autism. Next slide. As I mentioned, we have a campground, and ours by design and intention is a backcountry hike-in campground. So you have to hike about 1 mile from our overnight parking lot to get back to the campground, and that's what we want. We want people to be able to get out, escape, get away from the modern sounds and the modern amenities. Our campground is open year-round. It is utilized year-round, most heavily in spring and fall. And we have accommodations for individual and group sites that accommodate from 6 to 36 people at one site. Next slide. Really from March to December, we offer a wide array of family and youth programming. A lot of those are in-person programs and events, but we also have resources within the park that allow for self-discovery. One of the key ones in our picnic area is our children's discovery area, which is that picture you see on the top there. That's a certified outdoor classroom with an organization called Nature Explorer. There's also an associated track trail. That's a branded trail that is dedicated for getting youth out into nature and exploring. So that outdoor, that children's discovery area gets kids hands-on, active, and gets them in touch with the landscape and our themes and our activities in the park. But then we have a lot of other self-guided activities, including Junior Ranger, backpacks that families can come out on their own and enjoy. Next slide. One of the more recent and exciting opportunities for Sky Meadows is we were recently designated a dark sky park with the International Dark Sky Association. We received that designation the same day that Natural Bridge State Park received their designation, making us the 3rd and 4th Virginia state parks to receive the designation, and making us the 168th park worldwide to receive that designation. And that really signifies 3 things. Number one, it signifies our commitment within our own boundaries to conserve dark skies and mitigate light pollution. So if you come to our park, you'll see all of our outdoor lights are designed to be dark sky friendly. Number 2, it shows our commitment to allowing education opportunities about dark sky and astronomy-related programming, and making opportunities for amateur astronomy activities. And that's all thanks to the 3rd thing, which is our dark skies that are above the Sky Meadows, which is one of the things that really highlights the fact that we're part of a much bigger community here. And that designation is really hinged on the community around us to maintain that. But it's something that we're very excited for, and we have programs monthly that the public can come out and enjoy. Next slide. So to see how we operate here at the park, so I'm one of 5 full-time staff members at Sky Meadows. We have 2 chief rangers, one that focuses on our programming, events, volunteerism, and frontline services, and the other that focuses on our operations and maintenance and our law enforcement. And we have a full-time office manager as well as a full-time park ranger law enforcement. And then we have approximately 12 part-time rangers that are employed year-round. They do everything from keeping the park looking nice to meeting and greeting our guests, handling all the behind-the-scenes work, conducting our programs and events to our guests, maintaining the trails, keeping them open, and then assisting and coordinating the wealth of volunteers we have here, which leads to the next slide. We couldn't do a fraction of what we do at this park without the dedication and commitment of volunteers, both individual and groups. We have almost 200 active volunteers, individual volunteers at the park, and a wealth of group volunteers, including the Friends of Sky Meadows, Shenandoah Chapter Virginia Master Naturalist that I mentioned earlier, Northern Virginia Astronomy Club, and a myriad of others. And we're so thankful for what they do. I know we got a number of staff and volunteers on the meeting tonight. I just want to take this opportunity to thank both our staff and the volunteers for all their hard work and dedication. So next slide. So in terms of financials, we operate on approximately $334,000 annually. And the last fiscal year, we brought, as you can see there, almost $400,000. That's not typical for us. We typically do not bring in more revenue than our operating budgets. But as Melissa mentioned, with COVID last year, really increasing our visitation, that was something that impacted those numbers that you see there. Last slide. And so the last thing I'll leave you with, again, is just, we look at ourselves as an opportunity for folks to not only enjoy this landscape within our park and to connect there, but as a gateway and an opportunity to explore more. And that's really important to us when we do all of our planning here at the park. Is we want people to understand that when they get up on our heights and look out, they're not just looking at Sky Meadows, but they're looking at the community. So with that, that's Sky Meadows, and I believe that I'll pass it back to Bill.
Hey, thanks, Kim. What a great park. Amazing stuff. Thank you. So we're going to talk about the master planning process. This first slide depicts the cover of the 2018 Virginia Outdoors Plan. The Outdoors Plan is the Commonwealth's plan for outdoor recreation and land conservation and has been around since 1965. The Outdoors Plan is required for Virginia to receive land and water conservation grant funding. And we are currently working on the 2023 Virginia Outdoors Plan and welcome your participation in the process. Next slide, please. So state parks has quite a few planning processes. One is the resource management plan, which deals with natural and cultural resources of the park. There's also a visitor experience plan, which kind of determines what the stories that'll be told at the park from an interpretation standpoint. And then there's a business plan, which talks about how to generate revenue and manage revenue at the park. So the Code of Virginia requires that master plans, also called development plans, be written for all Virginia state parks. The plans cover the size, types, and location of facilities, as well as the site's special features and resources. Plans also cover infrastructure such as roads and utilities and outline phase development and costs for operations, maintenance, and staffing. While we generally develop only 10 to 15% of the park, we're always balancing natural and cultural resources with public use and enjoyment of the park. We want to be able to provide wilderness camping and hiking without further endangering species like the rusty-patched bumblebee, which is found at Sky Meadows. Following the development of the initial master plan, each state park master plan is reviewed and updated every 10 years if necessary. Planners meet with park staff to identify new land acquisitions, development, and progress on the master plan. External and internal factors impacting the park are also assessed. If changes are significant from the original master plan, a public meeting like this one is held. Next slide, please. So this is the master plan map, which is a lot longer than most of the state parks that we have. The left side is where you'll find the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. And there's also, you'll see that property to the left top. That's 240 acres around the Appalachian National Scenic Trail that was given to us by the National Park Service. In the middle part of the park, you'll find the historic area, and you'll find the Mount Bleak House, and you'll also find the day use area, as well as Turner Pond. And I'll review this map after we do the phase development plan and point out other facilities at the park. The park that's east of Route 17 is called the Lost Mountain area and has some horse facilities there also, and many trails. Above to the right side, you'll see a square box, and that's the text box, which has some general comments about the kinds of things we look at in our master plan that may not necessarily be able to show up on a map. So we want to expand trails and trail connections. We want to enhance accessibility at the park. We want to replace wire fencing with historically correct fencing. We want to resurface our park roads and parking lots. We want to place utility wires underground, especially in the historic area. And we want to rehab and restore historic structures following guidance from the 2019 structural assessment. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to review the 3 phases of the phase development plan. And the phase development plan generally lasts about 30 years, and it's designed to sort of be full build out of the park. And with Sky Meadows, our major focus is on restoring and enhancing, renovating what we have here, the historic structures, maintaining the sense of place in the area. So phase 1, we want to reconfigure Turner Pond, Lost Mountain, Route 17 intersection, particularly for safety ingress and egress for Turner Pond, to include safe hiking, biking, and equestrian crossing. That's very important. The safety of our visitors is important to us, and being able to go from one side of the park to the other is also valuable. We want to reconfigure Edmonds Lane / Picnic Area Road intersection for safe ingress and egress. We want to construct a much needed maintenance shop. We want to do road improvements, resurfacing of existing roads to include bike lanes and parking areas. Next slide, please. Phase 1 continued. We talked about renovating and rehabbing the structures we have here at Sky Meadows. So number 1 on the second page is enhance the Abner Settle historic area. Stabilize and renovate the Mount Bleak House. Stabilize and renovate the dairy barn for programs and interpretation. Stabilize and renovate farm structures for agricultural use and interpretation. Expand comfort stations in the historic area. replace wire fencing with period fencing and restore stone walls in the historic area, and place utility wires underground in the historic area. Next up, we want to stabilize and restore the Wayside Cottage, which dates to 1781. We want to restore that as a staff residence. We want to complete restoration and rehabilitation of historic structures per the 2019 structural assessment, which I had mentioned earlier. And then we want to enhance the picnic area with utilities and a new comfort station. Next slide, please. In phase 2, we want to stabilize and renovate the bank barn for maintenance storage. And we want to construct a visitor center with exhibits and a park office with a new contact station on Edmonds Lane. So with the new center, visitor center and comfort station, they'll have exhibits that will tell the story of the Crooked Run Valley and also have park offices. The visitor center design will reflect the historic character of the property and the sense of place at Sky Meadows. Next slide, please. Phase 3, 2 items, the new staff residence, and renovate and repurpose the current horse barn as a comfort station on the east side of 17. Next slide, please. This is the blow up of the west side of the park, which includes to the far left the Appalachian National Scenic Trail, and above this would be the 240 acres acquired from NPS. It's also the border of Clark and Fauquier County to the very west of the park. There's lots of trails, vistas, overlooks, as well as backcountry camping on this part of the park. And you will note that land is mostly bordered by the National Park Service or the G. Richard Thompson Wildlife Management Area, so it's kind of protected from development there, any kind of development, or impacts on the viewshed, which is very nice. Next slide, please. This is a blow up of the Central Park property, which includes the historic area. So the historic Abner settled property with the Mount Bleak House and historic structures is kind of to the left on the map. There's a picnic and day use area and trails in the center part of this map. To the right side, there's a maintenance area, farm corral, as well as Turner Pond. The new visitor center is located kind of central, central and lower on the map. The new visitor center with exhibits and offices is planned for the park at Edmonds Lane. The visitor center design should reflect and complement other park structures and be worthy as a gateway to the Crooked Run Valley and its pastoral viewshed. Next slide, please. This is the east of US 17 part of the park, often called the Lost Mountain area. At this site, there's a horse barn and stables. There is plan to repurpose that particular structure as a comfort station and for use in programs. Most of the Lost Mountain area remains in open fields and pasture lands, and the plan is to keep them like that. And there are just loads of hiking trails in this area of the park. Next slide, please. So for public input tonight, we ask that you add your comments into the chat box during the meeting and now. Include your name and organization if you represent a group. State your comment and provide any facts that support your position. And just note that although public comments are only accepted from the chat box tonight, they're accepted for 30 days after this. And I'll give you that information in a second. You'll also have about 10 minutes after the program closes to continue making comments, and we'll extend that longer if we need to do so. Next comment, next slide, please. Yeah. So written comments will be accepted up until June 20th, 2021, 30 days from now. And you send them to myself by mail or by email or by fax. And this will be put up again one more time before the meeting's over with. So after tonight's meeting, we'll go back, not go back, we're already here, but we'll update, take your comments and update the executive summary and map. And then we'll present to the BCR, the Board of Conservation and Recreation, for recommended approval. Then we'll send it to the General Assembly for 30 days for their review. And then at that point in time, it will be presented to Todd Chrisman, the DCR Director, for his adoption. So I thank you very much for your participation. We look forward to reviewing your comments and finalizing the Sky Meadows State Park Master Plan. If there are members of the media present tonight, you're welcome to stay after the meeting to pose any questions to our Public Communications Office. The chat box will remain open for at least 10 more minutes if you have any final comments you'd like to make. And we certainly appreciate your attention and attendance tonight. Thank you.
So Bill, there are a few questions that I think some of us can answer that are on the phone. One being, how many visitors came to the park last year? Maybe the park manager can jump in and help us with that one.
Yes, getting that, yeah. Last year was 256,820. I'll answer that in the chat box here.
One of the questions has to do with restoration of the Abner Settle Historic Area, and it says, will they meet the Secretary of Interior guidelines? I did reply in the chat box, but I'll also verbally say that, yeah, all of our historic structures will meet the historic resources, state historic resources guidelines, and if they're federally registered, they'll also meet the federal guidelines. And I did write that in the chat. One of the questions is, will the conversion of the horse barn to a comfort station result in the loss of any horse trailer parking sites?
That would be a no.
Okay. And some other questions has to do with, let's see, will there be additional parking at the Lost Mountain parcel?
Yeah, that is something that I think would be in consideration for that area.
So just to chime in, yes, that's a good suggestion. Why don't we look at that when we get back? That'll be one of the comments we can look at, maybe adding some additional parking at Lost Mountain. Very good comment. We appreciate that. No promises, but we'll try to look at that.
So just so everybody knows on the phone, all of your questions may not be read tonight, but we certainly are recording this meeting and will reply to all of the comments that come in, and by after the June 20th deadline. One of the questions are, where is the Wayside Cottage? Is this the same as the historic log cabin next to the Bleak House?
That is not.
No, it is not. Did you want to ask that, Kevin?
Yeah, the Wayside Cottage is at the corner of the intersection of Route 17 and Edmonds Lane.
Have you considered permitting bikes on more of the trails, is one of the comments. I think our trails are multi-use, aren't they, Kevin?
Yeah, we have about 10.5 miles of our trail that are already designated as multi-use, which does include 4 bikes. And if I could, I can answer the one question about the specific location of the visitor center. That was, if you can look at the map as well, refer to that. I know that I believe Kelly had included a link. Though there has been nothing definite settled in terms of a proposed location, areas in consideration would be, I would say, within the last quarter mile of Edmonds Lane before you reach our current contact station on the right hand, obviously on our side of Edmonds Lane.
And for everyone on the phone or on the audio and camera, I did put a link in the chat to find these additional maps that were in this presentation. So you can always go to these links later if you had a hard time looking at something tonight. And I know it's a hard time seeing some of the stuff virtually. So you can go to the link I placed in the chat and find the maps and look at them more closely between now and June 20th. One of the questions for Kevin, is it possible to drive to the remote camping area to unload, then move a car?
It is not. So that campground is by design a backcountry hike-in campground. And so the nearest parking is approximately 1 mile from the camping area.
We appreciate all your comments, and we'll get back to you, those we haven't responded to tonight, by June 20th. And all of them will be taken seriously, and we'll look at those. Sometimes there's not always an immediate answer for some of your questions. For example, new trails into the G. Richard Thompson Wildlife Management Area, that would have to be negotiated out with the management area and all that stuff and planned out. So we probably can't promise anything, but we're always looking for trail connections and expanding into the region to make it a more walkable, bikeable, horse riding place. So
Here's another question for Kevin, I think probably simple to answer. It says, with the influx of visitors in the past, I think meaning COVID, do you see this as a trend where parking lots and trails overloaded? So I think they mean referring to this past year.
Yes, last year was certainly a unique situation for us. I think overall, as other state parks have noticed, I think it's certainly going to increase visitation and has increased people's interest in the outdoors and appreciation for the outdoors. If this year thus far this spring is an indication, I don't believe that we're going to see another surge quite like we saw last year at this time, save the event of another pandemic or a similar event, which we hope does not happen. We have been continuously growing at the park. But again, I think what we saw last year was a unique experience.
Are you considering hiring more full-time rangers?
That's perhaps something we could address maybe more in the question. At this time, there are no concrete plans for additional full-time staff.
And someone asked if there's a site plan available for the visitor center yet, and it's not been designed yet. Just the general location has been identified, and certainly it'll be under a lot of review prior to being constructed. So you'll have a chance again to look at that.
Someone discussed loving the sunrise hike that you offer on the first day hike and would love the opportunity for more events like that.
Thank you, Christine.
Just to clarify for everyone that the master plan projects, for the most part, are not funded yet. So you'll have to go through a whole stage of getting funding, and then we'll have to do design and begin to think about construction. But right now, none of these projects are, for the most part, funded yet. We'll have to go to the General Assembly or somewhere to get funding for that. So any support you can give us would be appreciated. Thanks. Okay, the master plan meeting is concluded. Thank you. Look forward to any more comments you have via email or by fax or in the mail. So thank you guys very much. Go out and enjoy the rest of your evening. It's beautiful.